Ambassador Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chatterton. Ladies and gentlemen, let me officially say good evening. It's really a pleasure to be here in St. Lucia. When we first mooted this idea that with Prime Minister Mottley and this substantial Barbados delegation coming to St. Lucia for the 40th CARICOM Heads of Government Conference, that we should use that opportunity to engage with the Barbadian community in St. Lucia and with St. Lucians with Barbadian connections. Mr. Chatterton immediately jumped upon it in a very enthusiastic manner, and we want to thank him for all the hard work he has done to make this town hall meeting a reality. The simple idea was that, look, if Barbados is having a Vision 2020, a year of return, and we are reaching out to Barbadians in the diaspora, that diaspora doesn't only extend to Canada and the United States and Europe. There's also the Caribbean diaspora. They're the Barbadians who live in Jamaica and Trinidad and St. Lucia and wherever else in this Caribbean region. And they too need to hear the message of the year of return. They too need to be invited to return. So it is my hope that while this might be the first such meeting addressing Barbadians in the Caribbean, that I know this meeting is going to be recorded and that this can go out all across the region, sending that message to our people that next year we want you all to come home. And it's not just about coming home for a visit. As you will hear from our speakers this evening, it is coming home for something very, very purposeful and something very valuable to Barbados and its future. But, you know, in addition to that national project, as you would know, Prime Minister Mottley is the lead Prime Minister for the CARICOM single market and single economy. And this is a structure that we are really trying to build. I am very, very enthused about the CARICOM Skills National Program. And we are trying hard to get our Barbadian people to fully buy into the idea of the program, to see themselves as citizens of the entire Caribbean, to get those CARICOM skills certificates, to see the entire Caribbean community as a place to search for life and career opportunities. And so a very important part of the message that you can bring to Barbados when you return home next year is to simply reassure and let our Barbadian people know that there are opportunities, tremendous career and business and life advancement opportunities all across the Caribbean. Because we do have in Barbados some very myopic people who seek to tell the Barbadian people, oh, there's nothing there for us in the rest of the Caribbean community. And we know that that is wrong. We know that that is not true. You know that that is not true. And who better to bring that message to our people next year that no, in fact, just the opposite. Go and get your qualifications, get your certification, get that CARICOM Skills National Certificate, and see the entire Caribbean community as your space within which to search out your destiny. So the format that we want tonight's proceedings to take is that you will hear some very short presentations from the Attorney General and the Prime Minister, but we really want to open up to questions. We don't want it to be a lecture. We don't want to have any long presentations from the head table. We really want you to engage with the head table. So, having said that, it now gives me great pleasure to address you first of all, the Honorable Dale Marshall, Attorney General of Barbados. Ladies and gentlemen, make him feel welcome.
Thank you very much, David. Honorable Prime Minister, former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, the Honorable Vaughan Lewis, colleague Minister, Dr. Jerome Walcott, Honorary Counsel, Mr. Justice Bell, and all of the Barbadians in the diaspora, but near to us physically and near to our hearts. We have limited time, so I'm going to be brief. The one thing that governments always insist on is that government is a continuum. But yet still, successive administrations spend half of their time trying to explain, even though government is a continuum, why one government is different from another. We've taken the realms of power in Barbados now for just over a year, and it has been an extremely challenging year. We've been ably led by the Prime Minister, and I know that she doesn't suffer fools or flatterers gladly, but I think that the fact that we've been able to make the strides that we have is perhaps overwhelmingly due to her leadership and to her example. But that is not to say that we do not have things that beset us on a daily basis. And my portfolio as Attorney General includes responsibility for the police and generally for law and order. And I have no doubt that Barbadians such as you, keen on what is happening at home, will be following the almost daily reports, things that are saying to you that the Barbados that we are seeing today is very different perhaps to the Barbados that you left. I therefore feel that it would be disrespectful of me not to, at the very least, give you a snapshot of where we are and follow it with my assurances of what we're doing about the problem. Last year in Barbados, we had 27 homicides. And I know that seems like a big number for a small country like ours. But thus far for the year, we've had 30. So in an entire year, we had 27, and in 6 months, we have surpassed what we had for all of last year. Of that 30, 17 were by gun. And to cut a long story short, we have been fighting external creditors. We have been fighting to restructure Barbados's debt, fighting to grow an economy, fighting to put Barbados where it needs to be. But almost matching every effort that we make to rescue our economy, we've been challenged by the fact that there are some individuals who seem hell-bent on tearing down everything that we're trying to build up. It doesn't take any kind of rocket science to tell you that in the face of a society that seems to be overwhelmed by gun violence, tourism will not thrive. You will not be able to nurture a healthy business environment simply because it will appear as though you are left with the Wild Wild West. Now, it didn't get like this overnight. And while I know that there are many people who have quick fixes, I hope that you are not to be numbered amongst them. We're not going to be able to turn around all of the challenges that we have overnight. But it's important for me to give you the assurance that we're turning them around. See, part of our problem has been that a large number of guns have been coming through Barbados almost unwittingly aided by an administration that didn't have regard to the things it should have been paying attention to. So we know that guns have been coming in through containers at the port, but only 6% of the containers coming in through the port historically have been scanned. I don't think I've told the Prime Minister just yet, and it's probably not my job to tell her, but the additional scanner that she authorized the government to purchase landed in Barbados last week. But the truth is, me and Mottley knows everything that happens even before I tell her. So she probably knew before the ship docked. But that scanner, then once it's activated within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll see that Barbados will finally be able to scan every single container that comes through our port. And what that means is we will almost immediately, not quite eliminate, because there are some other areas that are weaknesses, but we'll be able to reduce significantly the ability of people to bring guns into Barbados, and that will then allow the police to do the things that they have to do to wrestle the problem of gun violence to the ground. But time is flying. Let me tell you that we recognize it's not just a policing issue, though. And perhaps this is the area in which St. Lucians of the diaspora can help us. You know, one of the boys, literally boys, charged with murder last year was 15 years old. One boy charged with 3 homicides last year, earlier this year, was 18 years old. And it seems as though the average age of the people charged with homicides hovers somewhere between 21 and 23. The average age. It doesn't take long for you to work out that only 5 years ago, those people would have been leaving school. On Friday of this week, we will have about 4,000 young men and women leaving our secondary schools. And perhaps the single largest burden we have is finding a way to incorporate those young people satisfactorily into the mainstream of the Barbadian society in such a way that they don't find life on the block as being more attractive than legitimate, normal day-to-day activity. We are doing a number of initiatives. Time won't allow us to share them all with you. But we've asked all of the ministries who are responsible for discharging social responsibility, such as welfare, community development, youth affairs, and so on, to use the vast millions of dollars that the government puts into their hands every single day to try to turn around this problem. You see, you only call the police after it has happened. And we're saying that that reactive response is not satisfactory for modern Barbados. We need to go back to the root of the problem and deal with it through adequately and targetedly putting social service responses in place. We've only been in government for 1 year, but I'm proud of the strides that we've made on behalf of the Barbadians in Barbados and on behalf of the Barbadians abroad. Next year, 2020, allows us an opportunity to come together as a Barbadian family and not only celebrate, but it allows you in the diaspora to come home and to put your shoulder to the wheel, recognizing that no matter where you might live, Barbados is always the place that you might come and call home. I'm grateful for your warm welcome, and I look forward to the opportunity to answer a few of the biting questions that you might have to present to us.
Prime Minister Mottley has indeed been carrying a tremendous burden, not only nationally, but regionally as well. And she has done, in my opinion, I share the opinion of the AG, tremendously well over this past year. Barbados, we have been able to stabilize Barbados, certainly to stabilize the finances of government. We are no longer in that crisis mentality. And now we have established a platform from which Barbados can grow and develop and systematically deal with its problems. But in addition to what she has managed to achieve in Barbados, she has also energized the Caribbean community. She has brought a new life, a new spirit, a new sense of hope and optimism about the Caribbean integration movement. And over the past year, we have seen the flagship project of CARICOM, the single market and single economy, making strides once again. And there's now a positive and hopeful spirit about CARICOM. Brothers and sisters, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the first female Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Mia Amor Mottley. Make her feel welcome, please.
Thank you very much, David. Please sit, please. Former Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Mr. Vaughan Lewis, Attorney General, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Justice Bell, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, including those members of my delegation who have helped very much in the effort of stabilizing your home country in the last year, because this by no means has been a singular effort of myself or the cabinet or even the government of Barbados, but it has been an effort of the people of Barbados who have wanted nothing but success for their own country, and for people to stop asking the question, but what really happened to Barbados? Which regrettably was being asked by too many for too long in the last decade. And as I reflected on where to start tonight, the truth is that for all intents and purposes, I've come to a meeting that treats to your presence in St. Lucia as if it was just another parish, because that is what the single market and single economy portends for us. That we live in this Caribbean, those who have chosen to come together to establish this one market and this one economy, as if we are living in the same space, in spite of the fact that we are truly a community of sovereign nations. So that I feel as though I am still at home, and I'm sure that you, in many respects, feel that way too, because you are so close that really and truly you have the ability to monitor on a daily basis, to reach out, to travel quicker than most, and to be able to participate more than most. And it is therefore against that background that when the ambassador and the honorary consul, and I'd like to thank Mr. Charlton, I'm not sure why he's down there, he really needs to be up here. I'd like to thank them for allowing me this opportunity, because even though our CARICOM meetings start tomorrow morning earnestly with the Ministers of Finance meeting, and even though we just came in this afternoon, I felt that it was important enough this evening at 6 o'clock. I felt that it was important enough to engage. On the previous visits here, I've had the opportunity to meet with some of you, to speak to some of you individually, but this opportunity to speak to you as a collective and to hear from you is one that I relish, particularly as we go into the next 3 days of meetings, because I want to hear your perspective. And as the ambassador said, yes, we are here to speak first and foremost about the gathering. And the gathering is about being able to allow Barbadians to come home and to reconnect, to be able to do it not just as a national, but to reconnect at the parish level. Because really and truly, strong families make strong communities, and strong communities make a strong nation. And much of what you heard the Attorney General speak about can be countered not just by strong law enforcement measures, but indeed and in fact by us being able to strengthen families within our country, and by extension to strengthen communities. And the best way that we know how to do so is first and foremost for people to gather and reconnect and establish a common mission once again. And in a sense, that is what we are doing here this evening with you. Because it is important that irrespective of the fact that you are in a different part of the Caribbean from us, and I'm going to keep using that language because this single market and single economy really is about us aspiring to that one space based on common values and common pursuit and common mission. In spite of the fact that you are in another place, many of you, I know, have families at home, have properties at home, have an interest in what is happening at home, and in some instances will be returning home. In some instances you've made here your home, but you have a consciousness about what is happening at home. And because our development over the course of the last decade has not been the smoothest, your interest is even more piqued than it might otherwise be if we were still very much in a smooth and easy environment. And where do we stand today? By asking you to come home and to recommit to parishes, we're effectively saying that we want you first and foremost to play your part within your family, and then to play your part within your church or your community or your sporting groups, irrespective. Some of you would have been active in cricket or football or netball. Some of you would have been active in your primary schools after leaving school. Some of you would have been active in your churches. We believe that it is important to build strong institutions again. And the one wonderful thing about this technology is that you can stay from here in Castries or any part of St. Lucia and fully participate in the activities of the groups to which you may either have previously belonged or, once you go home for the gathering, would wish to belong to again. And part and parcel of what we are trying to do, therefore, is to encourage active citizenship of Barbadians, recognizing that citizenship in the age of technology has been redefined to be able to extend and to include those who live in the diaspora, because you can participate in almost every aspect of the country's life without being present. And we have gone from New York to Toronto to Montreal to Washington to London to be able to speak to Barbadians, to be able to set that story out. Because in truth and in fact, there are more Bajans living outside than live within the 166 square miles. And if their country is in need of that boost to rebuild, then who best to reach out to but Bajans wherever and however they may be found. So against that background, I look forward to seeing many of you. You have the benefit that you can treat to it almost like a bus ride. You have the benefit that you may be able to do the gathering 3, 4, 5 times. Some of you may be lucky to come where you were born, to come in some instances where you spent too much time and hence ended up marrying somebody from a different parish. In some instances where you worked, in some instances where you went to secondary school. And because of your proximity, you have the ability to engage at multiple levels in a way that others who are a little more distant may not be able to do. But let me give you some context as to where else we are, because I'm sure that separate from the gathering and before we get into your questions, that is what some of you would like to know. Your country is on the rebound, and I'm happy to report that. You know, this morning when I looked at our foreign reserves, we had passed the amount. We are now at 1.2 billion, 1,207 million to be precise, from just over 400 million when we took over the government at the end of May last year. So we have almost trebled the foreign reserves by the careful stewardship of taking the right decisions and working with the right partners, from our international partners to our regional partners, to domestically being able to make the adjustment within the country. And the one major difference that we've tried to highlight in making this adjustment is something that we hope represents the essence of who we are as Barbadians, that we believe in sharing the burden, and that every previous adjustment that the country has had to make economically in the 1970s, in the early 1980s, in the early 1990s, which is more of recent memory for most of us, we have put labor at the forefront of the adjustment. To look at 1991 to 94, we lost 4,500 jobs in the public service. We had an 8% pay cut. And effectively, at that time, we were only responding to a situation where our foreign reserves had dropped to 1 week of import cover, when on this occasion we had the double whammy of not only seriously declining foreign reserves, but also that Barbados had become, regrettably, over the course of the last decade, the third most indebted country in the world, with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 176% to be, it came in? With 176%, and which we have now reduced to 121%, or 125%, sorry, over the course of the last few months through a shared approach of debt restructuring. Taking owners of capital, sharing with workers the burden of adjustment, and other persons within the economy taking a piece of the action, whether locals carrying some, visitors carrying some, capital carrying some, workers carrying some. And it has been an approach which, quite frankly, is now being recognized by many as a preferred approach rather than the disproportionate adjustment on workers. Now, I want just simply to say that had we not done that, it would have meant that the $500 million, for example, that we have saved alone in interest payments, for us to have saved that $500 million by making workers take the adjustment as they did in the 70s, as they did in the 80s, as they did in the 90s, would have meant that almost 10,000 public servants would have had to go home. Now, you and I both know that there is no way we could have maintained the stability of our country if we had to send home 10,000 public servants. And the longer we start to move away from that date in May last year when we took over, the easier it is for people to forget how dire and how difficult it was. But we have to remember that the country went through 23 credit downgrades, one after the other, 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 without any break, without any change in direction. And until we settled with the International Monetary Fund a program, and until we settled the domestic debt restructuring, at which point Standard & Poor's gave us an upgrade of 3 notches on the domestic side of our operations, there had been none for almost a decade. And the reason why these two gentlemen are passing me their phones and causing me to look at this is because as I speak to you, literally, Moody's Investor Service has done a most unusual thing and has today upgraded both Barbados' foreign and local currency issue ratings from CAA1 to CAA1, from CAA3, and affirming the fact that the foreign currency senior unsecured bond rating at CAA3 and maintain the stable output. Now, the bottom line is that we have had this good news and these upgrades coming now, even as I speak to you tonight from Moody's, in spite of the fact that we are still in discussions on the restructuring of our foreign debt. Now, the only reason they'd be doing that is because there is a sense of confidence that Barbados is now moving in the right direction yet again and will secure its future, unlike the last decade. And we take these things in stride. I thank all who continue to work and to lift the heavy burden from the social partnership, labor unions, the private sector organizations, the members of the different government departments and ministries, members of the cabinet, ordinary Barbadians. But I say that we take it in stride because even though this good news continues to come, I am not going to rest, and my government is not going to rest until we are fully and completely out of where we inherited. And that requires us, as I've said to the country, stay in the course. We have no doubt that we can make the journey. And I tell Barbadians all the time, we got this. But by the same token, I am sanguine enough and sensible enough to know that 2-3 days of antibiotics does not mean that the underlying symptom is cured. And that even though you start to feel a little better, and even if you have a little more pep in your step, you would be foolish to believe that you can stop the course of antibiotics before the course has truly ensured that the underlying symptoms are over. Jerome is the doctor, not me. So he would have to know that even if I was inclined to go in that direction, he would remind me of the folly of that with respect to the curing of any condition in any part of the world. So that, are we out of the woods? We're getting there. Do we and are we going in the right direction? Yes, we are. But what is it that we need more than anything else now? We need people's commitment to being able to want to invest in Barbados and to want to do the things that will allow our economy to grow again. We need people's commitment to want to participate, whether in terms of skills or ideas, and to be able to add value to where we are going. We are about to launch the most massive national retraining initiative that the country has seen. Why? Because in a very real sense, Barbados has been living off of fumes for the last 15 or so years. And when the gas tank is off fumes and there's nothing more in the tank, it's not going anywhere. So you have to plow back in and you have to put back in. And putting back in is nothing more elaborate than each of us one by one, doing the best that we can do and producing the most that we can produce. And that's all an economy is at the end of the day. It's about how you're going to produce for yourself, your household, and for your business that you're working in. And if we can do that to the best of our ability, if we can ensure that what we do equates to excellence, that when people come to Barbados, they say, I want to go back there because I had the most unbelievable experience. It means that we are in the ling, that we are part and parcel of where people want to be able to spend their money and their time. And it means fundamentally that we are competitive among people. It is true that we have always been a little more expensive than most, but that is largely because, particularly within our tourism product, Barbados has pitched itself at the higher end of the market. But you can charge almost whatever you want if people feel they're getting what? Value. And value comes down to the quality of the experience. And the quality of the experience comes down to our commitment to excellence. So that we are now, as I said, in the public and the private sector, about to launch, in fact, I believe earlier today, the tripartite mechanism that we had in place recommended to me today, the staffing of that unit, so that we can move on, the beginning of the staffing of the unit, I should say, and that we can get to the process of utilizing the funds that we have put aside in this fiscal year to start the process of identifying every single job in the country, what constitutes excellence in each of those jobs, and how we can train to excellence, and ultimately how we can monitor the program of excellence. Can we achieve that in a year? Absolutely not. 2 years? No. We give ourselves at least 4 years to start the process and to report progress back to the country. And why? At 53 years, you don't just up and decide that you can do things overnight. And the country for a long time has ignored some fundamentals that it needs to focus on again if we are going to make this country the best place for not only you, but your children and your grandchildren going forward, and for you to continue to say that you are proud Bajans and proud of what the country stands for and what the country can achieve. In addition to that, we believe that Barbados has to be a place of opportunity. And a place of opportunity means that regardless of where you come from, you must be able to achieve in our country. And that is why our government took the decision immediately upon winning that your children and grandchildren who wanted to go to university must be able to do so. That the platform through education has always been the mechanism by which our people have made that defining difference in turning the corner from circumstances of poverty. Now, where we add to that is that we want to tell you and to tell the rest of Barbados, it's not just about academic education. It's also about the technical and vocational education. And to that extent, when we were in Morocco recently, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and myself negotiated not just to get academic scholarships, but scholarships in technical and vocational areas. Because if you and I really want to talk truth to our children, what are we going to tell them? How many people really make more money than a plumber? Study yourself. How many people make more money than a welder? How many people, where's my friend? How many people make more money than a chef? And we want and forget to have these conversations with our children, because at the end of the day, these are people who are producing, they're building. They may not have the same academic qualifications as a person who is an admin officer, but they're adding value and shaping what our environment looks like and how we build it, and we need to respect it. Now, because of that, it brings us back to the other part of the conversation. How do we continue to have and support a British educational system born out of the 1940s education reform in England that writes off 60 to 70% of our population at the age of 11 or 12 years old before they even get a chance to even decide what they like, what they're good at, what they can be. And we believe that the only measurement of their worthiness is if they can pass a common entrance at a high level, without recognizing that those are some of the same people who are going to be the plumbers, the welders, the contractors, the chefs, and the other things in the society. And worse still, what is the most powerful asset for a tourism economy like ours or St. Lucia or Grenada or the Grenadines? If people don't like you and you're smiling and making people feel good, don't care how cheap you are, how affordable you are, what are they going to do? They don't come in. So that the most powerful expression, the most powerful contribution that we can make to adding value to what we earn as tourism economies, as international business economies, is how we treat people, how we smile, how we relate to people, how we remember the precepts of the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, so you don't treat people badly or poorly. And these are the things and these are the conversations. In addition to the heavy lifting that we're going to do with the restructuring of taxes and with the restructuring of public expenditure and with the monetary policy and with the liberalization of foreign exchange and all these other things, those are given. That's what you elected us to do. That's what leading in government is about. But leading a nation is about changing the perspective of a population and getting the population to move with you. Because the heavy lifting cannot be done by a government alone, but has to be done by an entire population. And that is where your country is now at. And that is why, in spite of coming in on a plane at 6 o'clock this evening, in spite of not eating all day, that we are here with you, because one blows do what? Kill old cow. And in the same way, one blows kill old cow, as the Bible tells us, where 2 or 3 are gathered, we start to build the foundation of the movement. Now, we need you, not just to invest, not just to play your role as a citizen, but the last thing we really need you for is your voice and your advocacy on matters that not just Barbados faces, but St. Lucia and the rest of the Caribbean and a lot of other small island developing states. You and us will know very shortly, as we would say at home, what God we're serving when the hurricane seasons really kick in. When the floods come and the rains come or the winds come, and our entire existence within what? 48 to 72 hours could be completely different from what it is today. And we keep telling the rest of the world that the deal that you want to do as a global community is unconscionable, because you are saying that you want to be able to deal with climate change, but you are prepared to accommodate a change of 3 degrees and perhaps 2 degrees. But we know from our own work within the region and at the University of the West Indies and other regional institutions that we need 1.5 to survive. And if we doubted it, 2017 was the cruelest reminder of all, as it created in our faces known climate refugees. We might have been reluctant to call the people who had to leave Montserrat and run from the volcano more than a decade ago climate refugees. But they ought to have been called so. But there is no doubt now that with the evacuation that took place in Barbuda, and with those that had to leave Dominica, that there is a new category of refugees within the Caribbean that are born of climatic disasters. And those of us who believe that we are immune from such ought better to remember the words we learned coming up, many of us in Christian households. There but for the grace of God goes I. The bottom line is that even our own country, Barbados, and not what each time, is subject to hurricanes. It is true that we are off the trodden hurricane path that most people know, and that is probably because we are really more in the Atlantic Ocean than we are in the Caribbean Sea. But we know that every 60, 70, 80 years, we have a brush. And the brushes in the 19th century could get rid of a cathedral. Far less in a world where the fury of the climatic events has gotten worse because of global warming. Now, governments will continue to make noise and to make our point, and we will do it. But as a companion to what we do as governments, I want to call on you, as I've called on Barbadians everywhere else, and other ordinary people across the world, regardless of who I speak to nowadays, to recognize your power as citizens of the world, to be part and parcel of a movement that starts to put those who have power on the back foot with respect to the urgent decisions that are required first out of conscience in order to be able to preserve the world in which we live. And the slides clearly show, the evidence clearly shows, that the first to be affected now will be the Arctic and the Antarctic summer sheets, Greenland, and the Coral Islands. And what are we? So we are in that first set of entities to be affected. And in almost every instance in the Eastern Caribbean, our economies are coastal. Our national security installations are coastal. And the conversations that we have, yes, will take place with respect to strengthening our resilience, having to fuel growth as a matter of urgency, because that's what we need in order to be able to spend the money to become more resilient. But it must also fuel conscience globally. And that's where people like you on your Instagram, on your Facebook, on different web pages. The reason why the people in Hong Kong or in other parts of the world can organize is largely as a result of technology. You know, technology has good and bad to it. It's also one of the reasons why, and AG, you're absolutely correct that we haven't had a chance to talk on one or two things, but one of the things that the United Kingdom and other developed countries are coming to recognize is that software or mobile apps like WhatsApp and other things that are instantaneous can equally be responsible for driving actions that can lead to criminal behavior and can lead to people acting without thought or without pause, and that is part and parcel one of the difficulties that we face, particularly with younger people. Now, what does it mean that we have to root them more, and we have to teach them from earlier why they have to take responsibility for their own actions? And the first action that they have to take responsibility for is thought. That I got to think first before acting. Now, we would think that we would talk to them as older teenagers and remind them about responsibility and choice, etc. You got to start earlier, because they have access to these tools from an early age, and their systems are subject to emotion just like anybody else. Now, you can't assume that they will always have somebody with them when their emotions are sparked one way or the other in a strong or negative way. By the same token, these same tools allow us to be able to have democratic movements that can coalesce. And I simply ask you as Barbadians and citizens of the region to recognize that what we face is perhaps greater than any other challenge that we have faced in our history as a nation with respect to the threats of climate change. In Paris, last week, they recorded the hottest ever day. To have a day at 44 degrees, I wouldn't even know where to start thinking about what 44 degrees feels like. But that's what's happening, not at the equator, but in Europe. So this is not a fairy tale. We have multiple journeys to travel. We have multiple things to do together. I'll stop at this stage because I really do feel that tonight is about answering your questions as much as anything else. And I'm conscious that many of you I've seen over the course of time in some instances too, and participated in conversations with. So with that, I'd like to thank you for coming out, because I know that you didn't have to come out tonight on a Tuesday night. And your presence alone here means that you are still very much interested in where your country is going, what your country can achieve, and in many instances, I believe, how you can help make that difference to where we go as a nation. Thank you very much.
Some of you here will know that I have been trying to do this for 13 years. And so I'm so happy to see so many of you. And I am equally as hopeful as the ambassador that tonight is the start of a new beginning for Barbados and Lucia relationships, for the Barbadian community in St. Lucia to come together and to perhaps form an association of, Barbadians and St. Lucians and go forward from there. As the Prime Minister said, we're all part of the same Caribbean, and there's no real reason why we should be so separate sometimes in the way that we act and think. But tonight is an opportunity also for you to get answers to questions. I know some people have already indicated to me the nature of the questions that they have, or rather of the concerns that they have, and that they would use this opportunity to put those questions forward. I would like, though, perhaps, if maybe the first question or two could clarify any queries you may have in relation to the Vision 2020 Regathering Project. Because I know it was talked about, it was launched in Barbados. I was in Barbados at the time, although I couldn't attend because I was undergoing medical treatment at the time, but I saw it on television. And so if there are any questions, first of all, relating to the Vision 2020 Regathering, is everybody aware of what it is and you have the necessary information, or do you need to get a bit more detail on that? It starts in St. Lucia and goes every parish. There are 11 parishes in Barbados, and then it ends in December of 2020 with a gathering of everyone, the country as a whole. Any questions relating to that? There's a mic over here, and yes, we have one question here. Mr. Donald Austin.
Yeah, my name is Donald Austin. Protocol established. Let me just first begin by really congratulating Prime Minister Mottley and her team for effectively doing such an effective job. I know most of you would know that Barbados met all of the targets set under the BERT process. And I think that's a significant achievement by any measure. So first of all, I'd like to thank you. I have a question because obviously I see the 2020 vision as a means of bringing people home to enjoy the homeland, etc. And I think it also attracts, you're looking to attract revenue coming in. So it obviously brings persons in and people can contribute to Barbados. I was wondering if there was going to be any attempt to make it not only a Barbados event with Barbadians coming home, but maybe bring a friend or two or something like that. Because I see it as as I said, as a means of a big celebration for Barbadians, but is there any thought of having, extending the invitation to others as well? Make it even a bigger party.
But Don, I never knew you to be a solitary person, so I assume that when you come here, you bring in 2 or 3.
I will respond to that.
Your problem might be choice. No, quite frankly, honestly, we want Barbadians to bring people home. We want Barbadians to come home. 2020 is about perfecting vision, and we believe that the opportunity to be able to allow us to have a conversation nationally, parish by parish, to help perfect the kind of vision some of the things that I spoke to you about, which are the intangibles of citizenship, the intangibles of building a nation, that we want Barbadians to be able to participate in those conversations and to see that they can continue to be active citizens from wherever they are. But if you can do that by bringing some who are there with you, by all means, and we'd love to encourage it. You mean in terms of parish by parish? Those will be unfolded, but what we're trying to do is to encourage family get-togethers, community activities around schools, community activities around shops. There are some shops in villages that have become institutions, activities around churches, activities around philanthropy, giving back. The major two areas of philanthropy that we want to highlight next year for Barbadians will be things that support the hospitals of Barbados, which all of us, because we believe that everybody is potentially in a relationship with a hospital at some point or another, and therefore we want to make sure that we have the best of what we can have in our hospitals island-wide. But at the same time, we want also to be able to change and to control the environment in which we live. And hence, from the National Botanical Gardens to inviting Barbadians to be planting trees literally every month, as well as those of you who are coming home to plant trees while you're home, because all of this helps control the kind of environment in which we are going to live in terms of softening it. Many of you would remember Bob Marley's song, Concrete Jungle, and the consequences of a concrete jungle. But equally, with respect to the benefits that come from that, both in terms of not just decorative trees, but fruit trees, we have to take on the task of food security in a more meaningful way, because if hurricanes disrupt, if a hurricane doesn't even hit Barbados, but it disrupts the logistic supply for food from South Florida right back through the Caribbean, then that affects us for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, in a way that we have to be prepared for, in a way that our grandparents and those that went before understood during World War II, that we each had a responsibility towards food security and making sure that those who had land had not only to plant cane, but a certain percentage of what they planted on the lands that they had was, in fact, to be able to grow food, because during a war, you don't know when next your food supply would be disrupted. So we have to think smart and move smarter, and we believe that the Gathering 2020 allows us to choose 2 areas of major philanthropy that will help as well, in addition then to just simply wanting to celebrate and share fellowship and lime and be together. So there are all kinds of benefits, because at the end of the day, if we don't enjoy each other's company, if we don't enjoy what we're doing, life becomes laborious, and we'll start to have mental health issues that none of us want. So from all perspectives, 2020 is that year for us to recalibrate and come together as one people and make the difference. The normal festivals, of course. In January, one of the great things about launching in January in St. Lucie is that we will also celebrate the centenary, the anniversary of the birth of the father of independence, Errol Barrow. And he was born in St. Lucie. So that it is appropriate that in January 2020, not only do we start the homecoming there, the gathering there, but that we also celebrate and give thanks for Mr. Barrow's life in his birthplace. Similarly, in February, you have the Whole Town Festival, and you have other festivals, Oysters, Independence, your traditional things. On top of that, we believe that we can do other things. The other thing that we're likely to have, ironically, and we're waiting formally, we've announced it, but we're waiting formally the resolution to be approved by the United Nations General Assembly, is that Barbados is likely to host the 15th quadrennial assembly of something called UNCTAD, which is the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. Sounds like a lot of funny words, etc., but it probably will mean that we will have upwards of about 3,000 people in Barbados for about 10 days. But we are the first small country of the world, small state of the world, to be hosting it. It's been going on since 1964. But as important as it is for us to be at the center of hosting it and the economic benefits that flow from it, the other key part is that along with the UAE, United Arab Emirates, it allows us to be able to help co-chair the trade and development agenda for the next 4 years in UNCTAD, and especially at a time when the world is going through all kinds of isms and schisms on trade and on development and on multilateralism being fought so hard against. And small states can only survive when the rule of law is there or when we have multilateral institutions. So we'll have a unique opportunity at the end of October to share with the people of Christchurch that assembly as well.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. My name is Arthur Aline. Madam Prime Minister, Mr. Ambassador, former Prime Minister of St. Lucia. 2 quick points, well actually 2.5. My wife and I went to Barbados 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago, to renew her passport and driver's license. We did about 6 backflips. We could not believe it was the same Barbados. Honest to God. People were so friendly, so helpful. The government workers, I mean, the immigration at Barbados was a terrorist organization, you know. And I'm telling you, a lot to be proud of.
Not anymore.
Congratulations.
They really are working.
Yes, they are fantastic. Went to the driver's license place. The girl gave us so much information and everything. Cannot complain. Everywhere we went, the police, everyone. On a more serious note, the 2020, I agree. We also have those Bajans who live overseas. We have a lot of skills that can come home and enhance Barbados in a very positive way. So I agree with that, what you're saying. But the most important thing I want to get onto now is CARICOM. Paul Keynes Douglas said many, many years ago, CARICOM and carry gone. And carry almost gone. Carry is now like a diamond upside down, top heavy. And thanks to you and the Barbados government, it's trying to change things. One thing I would ask you, 2 things. The OECS model, you should seriously consider the OECS model. Freedom of movement, travel, live, everything. We have not had, in the OECS, we have not had a flood of immigrants from Grenada, St. Vincent, Antigua, all these places. We've had minimal. What we have a flood of, which destroyed the Federation, the Jamaicans. We got thousands of Jamaicans in St. Lucia, all working as security guards and all that. A lot of them illegal. I'm just using that, nothing to do with Jamaicans, but I'm just using that as an example of where CARICOM is failing. The other thing, the skills certificate. This skills certificate, whilst well-intended, if I get a skills certificate for St. Lucia, I can't go and use it in St. Vincent. I can't go and use it in Trinidad. There's a lot of trouble to get it. I can use it, but so much trouble. You should be able to just walk in with it like a visa to the Caribbean. Walk in, you got a skills certificate from your country, bam, you in. So this is why I'm trying to say, focus on the OECS model. That is the most practical political model I have seen. It puts CARICOM to shame. Study it carefully, because there's a lot to learn from it. And that's just my word of advice to you from what I have observed. I travel to all these islands. I could go and live and work in St. Vincent tomorrow. I just walk in, bam. You know? Driver's license the next day. Things like that. And we have to, CARICOM has been too top-heavy for too long. too many BMWs and JAGs and stuff, and big offices, and people traveling all over the world. And these little islands, we cannot afford to pay these big salaries. You know, I have a degree in economics, you know. It was just for my own knowledge. And my degree better than some of them fellas working in CARICOM, I tell you. I'm serious. Serious. And what I'm trying to say, CARICOM needs to be trimmed. It needs to be streamlined, like what you did when you got into power. You did a wonderful job. The Barbados government, man, I tell you, we did backflips. I could not believe that was Barbados. I had not been for 2 years. And when I got there, I said, wow. I mean, I'll give you a quick little joke, you know. The second day, I went back to get my wife's passport, you know, in the place there, right? The same policeman that was there today. Tell me what you coming here for? You don't have to come here. She could pick up her own passport. She had a problem. She had the flu with the ear. She going here. I say, you think I'm foolish? You think I'll let my wife come here for you to thief her away from me? You know what the policeman do? He give me one big hug. I tell you, lovely. The security guards in there, wonderful. Barbados made me proud to be Bajan again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And by the way, we hang with at John Moore's bar when we go.
Thank you very much. It seems as if you're suggesting that Barbados...
tell everybody's secrets.
that Barbados should move closer to the OECS. Next question.
I just really want to say thank you so much, though. I mean, look, when we hear so often about the things that are wrong, that when we hear the things that are going well, we need to celebrate them, and we need to thank those who may be hearing our voice through streaming. I know, honestly, that the public servants of Barbados have been making more and more of an effort, and in a very real sense, I'm sure that many of the people in the Immigration Department and the Licensing Authority would love to hear the positive that you have just spoken with respect to your experience with them. And I certainly, and I'm sure that the others here, will help communicate that as we go forward as an inspiration to others to, if we do it, this is how good people feel. And it's better to feel good than to feel bad.
Thank you. Thank you. And I can certainly share that view of immigration because I had a very similar, excellent experience. I actually took in a passport application for a Barbadian in St. Lucia who is blind and has some challenges. And it was really a pleasure to have dealt with the officers in the department, right down to a lady coming out and taking the cash from you and going back inside and coming back with your receipt and everything. So you didn't have to stand in a line for the cashier. Thank you very much.
I should say to you, Mr. Charlton, that one of the things that they did with us a few months ago was to willingly, both the chief and the deputy chief, work with us and the minister to give us a chart of timelines for being able to turn around on the timelines for every application. So, as I said, we're not at point of perfection, but I feel good that we're passing all the right road signs as a nation, and we just need to stay the course.
Thank you. We had a hand over here.
Me? Okay. Good evening, Honorable Prime Minister and honorable members. Welcome to St. Lucia. My name is Basil Mears. I would like to touch on a few questions, not related to the 2020, but if you can assist myself and other Barbadians, I would appreciate it. I grew up seeing natural gas in Barbados in some houses. I've known for some time the offices at Willie having the street lights working off of natural gas. When I went home 2 years ago, I saw a car on Broad Street advertising that it was working on natural gas. Now, with all the greenhouse emissions and climate change that is affecting us, we're a very small nation with just as many cars as people. What is your government looking at in terms of doing with the natural gas, which I believe is in abundance in Barbados? And also, how can we use the oil drilling wood burning in St. Philip to assist, to reduce the cost of gasoline? Or are we committed to having OPEC prices? I noticed Trinidad recently, I don't know if it's a rogue move, have moved to get gas from Venezuela cheaper than they can produce. But all these things would help our position, I believe, with our debt struggles. And also, if you can direct me who to go to, I have two very influential and financial people interested in investing. One from the Dominican Republic by the name of Edmundo Gil Tavares in aviation. He has a company called GTC in Barbados, but they seem to be having some problems. And also a Mr. Zucaro, a Venezuelan who has been living in Florida for the past 30 years and wants to invest. And I recommended Barbados. So I would need to know who to go to. This is in lines of air freight, sea freight.
Look behind you, and my PS is there waiting to touch you and to take the information from you.
Oh,
okay, she's PS Investment.
Great, thank you.
Okay, but on the first matters, you've actually asked a lot of things in one.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, that's all right. What's your name, sir?
Basil Mears.
Basil Mears. Good to meet you, Mr. Mears.
Thank you.
With respect to the overall arching view, we have set ourselves the target of being a fossil fuel-free nation at best by 2030, carbon neutral at worst, in terms of our domestic activities. And that means that even though we recognize that we have oil and gas internationally, not internationally, in the maritime environment, that we don't want to rely on it as a nation in our day-to-day activities, whether it be transport or electricity generation or whatever in the country. We accept that planes or cruise ships coming, we may need depending on how technology moves over the course of the next decade. Having said that, the process, therefore, of being able to see the transition into clean vehicles is beginning. And we're starting where we can. In some government ministries, there are a few electrical cars. We're hoping to do more of the electrical buses, although we recognize that we are probably still 2-3 years away from the curve of prices coming down on electrical buses, and we are a little too early. An electrical bus, for example, costs about 750,000 Barbados dollars as opposed to a diesel bus, which is 400. Now, what we're also discussing is how we can use compressed natural gas, CNG, with the, instead of the diesel buses, or convert the existing diesel buses to CNG. And the minister is to deliver a paper to me on that very shortly. So we're in that period where the world is transitioning, but it is not yet quite there, both in terms of the confluence of both technology and pricing for mass-based activity. But there is no doubt that that is the direction in which the world is going. Our situation became more acute because the last government never bought a single bus for a decade, in 10 years. And therefore, we've had to deal with the fact that we're trying to keep buses on the road. There is no part of the world that you can go and sit down and buy buses or trucks now, because nobody in the post-2008 world keeps inventory. So you have to order, and people manufacture when you order, so that the earliest you're talking about is 9 months usually. And even then, because Barbados is not ordering hundreds or thousands, we go right down to the bottom of the totem pole with respect to the prioritization for the ordering of vehicles like this. But we have also recognized that human behavior is changing, and that more and more young people are less interested in buying cars for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and more of them recognize that they can use this to be able to access what they want, whether in if they're outside of the region through Uber or Lyft. In the region in Barbados, there's something I'm told called Beat Cab, and different other applications will be used. And most young people believe that why should we spend $100,000 or $200,000 on a car that will depreciate immediately upon leaving the car lot by 20%, when I can take that money and put it in something else that is more meaningful to me and be able to still get around as I need to get around in the country. So to that extent, having an efficient and effective public transport system is critical, as well as recognizing that the technology is changing. When we were children, and I keep saying it, because it's just so mind-boggling to me, there was a program called the Jetsons. Do you remember that? In the Jetsons, they had flying cars. And in the Jetsons, they had jet propulsion. And you go to Germany this year, to the major transport conventions, and you look at the Financial Times and all of the major newspapers and the Economist, and you see the pictures of the flying cars now. Financial Times last week spoke about the fact that in England they're using and testing out, the inventors are testing out different materials through 3D printing for jet propulsion. So that the rate of change that is taking place in the world in which we live is so fast that the most important thing is for us to be rooted to the values to which we stand, what we want to be able to achieve in terms of how the society should function, but at the same time be nimble enough to respond and to grab on to those things that can make a meaningful difference in the lives of our people. And against that background, I believe that the whole public transport system is going to change in the next 5 to 10 years in terms of how people move around in Barbados and where people move from Bridgetown, which I believe has to be more and more pedestrianized. And we're now looking at the options because there are so many studies that have been done over the years, but we've done nothing. We had study after study after study after study and no decisions. Well, we don't have that luxury anymore because we've gone, when we first came into government in 1994, we had about, what, 70, 75,000 cars. They now say we're up, what, upwards 125, 130,000? Madness, can't continue. So we have to have the conversations at the same time that are sensitive to where the technological developments are coming. As it relates to oil and gas offshore, we have the prospectivity is good, but once again, not much was done in the last decade. When we lost the government in 2008, January, we had left 24 bid blocks there. The last government eventually gave out 2, but nothing happened with those 2. We've now picked it back up, and we're now engaging in discussions with them. We're engaging in discussions with Trinidad and Tobago as well, because when all is said and done, our neighbor Trinidad and Tobago has had 100 years of experience in oil and gas, and we are being very methodical and thoughtful as to how and what we need to do, recognizing that in the case of Barbados, most of our offshore resources are deep sea. Luckily, the world now has the technology for deep sea, but deep sea only makes sense when oil prices are very much rising and higher than they are. So we're conscious that even when we do what we have to do, that we are still quite a few years away from actual production in those waters, but that the real bounty is not that. The real bounty is in the renewable energy and playing our part in being able to convert Barbados into a fossil fuel-free environment onshore at best and carbon neutral at worst. Minister of Foreign Affairs is reminding me that really and truly that there even Forbes magazine had a article that shows the prospectivity for electric vehicles in Barbados. And at that stage, I believe in the next 2-3 years, you are going to see things move rapid, rapid, rapid. You remember that in 1980-81 was probably about the first time that anybody had a video machine, a VHS in the house in Barbados. And that before 1980-81, there was nothing called a VHS. And now, look what he's doing with this. So the rate of change is there. Ministers reminded me that there are just under 500 electric cars in the country already. So we're going to see, once price and accessibility of technology, and the Light and Power is recognizing that they need to have more charging ports all around the island, which will also facilitate people feeling that they can buy electric or buy hybrid. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister.
And I look forward to your being an investment ambassador for Barbados. Thank you. As each and every one of you. We do have the legislation we hope that will come that will allow us to see how best we can make every Barbadian an investment promoter.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister. Time is getting on a bit. What I'd like to throw out for your consideration is that if we could take maybe 2 or 3 or 4 questions and then give the Honorable Prime Minister the opportunity to respond to all of those questions at the same time rather than each individual question. We are hoping that we can perhaps wrap up by about 9:30, which will give us a few more minutes. We have the room until 10 o'clock for, just to be able to engage with each other before we actually leave. So the next 2, 3, 4 questions, perhaps. We start here.
Good night, everyone. I'm going to try to be as concise as possible, but this might be the only forum that I might get to raise certain issues. I am a 3rd-generation St. Lucian who spent most of my life in Barbados. I went to school in Barbados, and through a personal situation, I ended up back in St. Lucia. And based on the information that we got here tonight, there are just certain things that I'd like to highlight. Firstly, in terms of CSME, the previous administration, and I don't want to make it political, but the previous administration took a policy decision that persons who have immigrant status like me can no longer qualify to access government services. Not that you can go and pay or anything like that, but I went to the polyclinic after I came from St. Lucia. I went to the polyclinic. I was in Barbados for quite some time, not working, and I went to the polyclinic to get a medical certificate. I was told that I have to regularize my status, although I had permanent status for more than 25 years. Now, we're encouraging persons to come back home. Incidentally, 2020 is when I plan to return to Barbados, if things go well. And my pension would last a lot longer in St. Lucia than if I returned to Barbados. I was there for literally a year and a half and could not find any work, having to depend on family, to the point that once I was told, you should go to government and see if you can access some kind of help for your children. I have 2 boys who are Barbadian. And I was told that after going through the embarrassing situation of going to look for welfare, which is something I never thought I would do in life, I was told that I cannot access any services because I am an immigrant. So even though my children are Barbadian, I was not able to access any government services. So that I'm not sure if the policy has changed.
I want to intervene because I don't want the pain to endure a second longer for you. Because part and parcel of why we have taken some of the decisions that we have taken as a government is that it was morally reprehensible in our view for you to have grown up in Barbados, to have Bajan children, to have benefited from Barbadian services, I'm sure, and education and all of those things, and then one day to be told that you can't access it.
Yes.
And I'm happy to report that the cabinet has taken decisions that we do not, 3 weeks ago, that we do not and will not turn away CARICOM citizens who are in Barbados and from being able to access basic services at the hospital, like Bajans, and at the polyclinics, and with respect to access to schools. Now, and I want to make this point clearly, because I know what it is to have been a Minister of Education for 7 years, and I never, ever saw us turn back a single child because of the absence of a birth certificate or absence of some other kind of papers. Because why? The country is a small country. And if you leave people outside of the educational system, the worst thing is a bright, uneducated person. Because they're going to find, what did it say, the devil find work for idle hands?
Yes.
Okay. And with respect to the access to health care, Mr. Walcott will tell you that TB or other public health conditions don't know race, don't know color, don't know nationality, don't know none of these things. So that we would be foolhardy to believe that we could keep a small country, 166 square miles safe, and have people living inside of it but not being able to access basic healthcare services at the polyclinic and hospital, or not being able to access basic primary and secondary education that is needed for everybody to begin the platform for their own personal development and to keep the money straight and narrow. So I feel your pain. I'm sorry. I regret that you've had to endure that, because, you know, there are times when, you know, President Obama used to say all the time that we need to allow the better angels of our nature to triumph. I believe in our government making this decision that we are allowing the better angels of our nature as a nation to triumph. So.
Okay, thank you. And I want to say, sorry, I want to commend this initiative because my friend here next to me, both her parents are St. Lucian. We went to school together at Robert Secondary, yay Robert. And the gentleman there with his children, I also know him from the Catholic Church. He was an acolyte. I hope he doesn't mind me saying that. So the connections are here. So I'm glad for this initiative, and I hope that we see more of this. And I will be there in 2020. God spare my life. Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
And let us be real. My grandmother was Grenadian. My mother born in Aruba. My family born all over the Caribbean. The gentleman to my left is, this one to my immediate left is of eminent St. Lucian blood. So that, believe you me, we need to do different. And I want to go back to the point you were making earlier. It was Mr. Ali. Part of the difficulty that we have within CARICOM is that we need to settle on a minimum standard with respect to social services, particularly education and training, and access to basic social services. When that happens, the reason why the OECS can have the freedom of movement easily is that almost all of the countries within the OECS are of comparable circumstances, and no one necessarily feels out of joint with the movement of people with respect to them. Because Jamaica and Haiti and Trinidad are larger entities, Guyana, there is the potential for anxiety. But in truth and in fact, as I've been trying to say to the region for the last year, almost every one of our countries in this region is underpopulated and does not have the population to be able to achieve and to produce at the levels that we ought to be producing at in order to live and sustain the quality of life that we want to have in this region. Now, I agree with you that we've made it too difficult, and we need to be able to show skills certificates, passports, certain levels of freedom of movement, and we're not having it. But I hope and I'm confident that we are moving in the next few years in that direction. And certainly within the Eastern and Southern Caribbean, I suspect you're going to see a lot more of that over the course of the next few years. We're not going to get there overnight, but we are going to work hard every day until we can make it easier for ordinary persons like yourselves to be able to move and make decisions as to where best you want to be in this part of the region.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister. Perhaps we can take two more questions. There's one here. There's one here.
Good night.
Any others? Yeah, there's one over here, one over here. Yes, thank you.
Good night, everybody, Madam Prime Minister, your team. My name is Ricardo Corbin. My question tonight is to do with trade. A lot of St. Lucians and persons from the OECS have grown accustomed to Barbadian products and the taste of Barbadian products. A lot of persons visit there for visas. They've been at the UWI or they've been on work attachments. And I am tired of smuggling sweet and dandy Moabi through the airport here for people. I am bringing it in by the gallons. And I am tired of lobbying Massey Supermarket to actually add it on their list of products. I've contacted Rose and LaFlamme and tried my best to get them to establish some type of trade link here. There is a huge demand for Barbadian products here. My advice to the Consular General and the new team that's going to be working here in St. Lucia is to establish some type of Barbadian small shop that has Barbadian products in it. Nothing unites people like a common taste. I've been here now for 9 years. I originally came here as a barber and one of the owners of Brothers Barbershop in Barbados, and I established my operation here now for the last 9 years.
Well done.
I've also recently opened a restaurant in Gablewoods Mall, Sunny Acres, and it's probably the only place in St. Lucia that you can get Barbadian food. Now, I've been trying for the longest while to unite Barbadians, but it appears that when Barbadians are out of Barbados, they don't want to be found for one reason or the next.
Look at them here now.
Well, I'm actually seeing them now. So I'm hoping that there's some type of miniature BMX that can be brought here, and that even if it's through the government,
Can I invite you, because it seems to me that you are highly entrepreneurial. And that the fact that you opened another barbershop here, you open a restaurant here, you're obviously a young man that enjoys taking risks and enjoys doing business. And I'd like to invite you to, once again, give my PS your information so that when you come home, if you come home, I'd like to link you with both the SBA at home, the manufacturers. I'm going to prepare to make the calls to Massey as well for you. Because they're involved very much in the regional private sector that we are bringing to the table at the Conference of Heads of Government. And I also would like to be able to see how best we can work with you to have a greater commercial presence in St. Lucia. Because if you have the inclination...
Thank you very much. Now,
if you have the inclination and you have the capacity, that's half the battle.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the young lady had told me give the name of the restaurant. It's called Island Blends. I was invited here today because a gentleman came there for a smoothie, and I said you look like Mr. Shuffler, you know, and I heard the accent, and he told me, well, they have this event here tonight, and that's the only reason why I'm here, or I would have missed it. So I'm just saying that through WhatsApp, I would like that this gathering does not leave here without a WhatsApp group being formed, that we can just send this information out, that we can stay in touch, right? So thank you very much.
Mr. Charlton, may I ask if there's a piece of paper going around for people to just sign up?
What we have done, pardon?
Is there a piece of paper going around for people to sign up?
When persons came in, and you stopped by the desk there are two ladies there, and if you left your name, email address, and mobile phone number, we will update, or as a matter of fact, it is being updated as we speak. We have an Excel spreadsheet, and we've got the names and addresses and so on of persons. But over the years, some of these persons have left St. Lucia, and some of the new persons who came, we've not been able to find them. This is why I said that this event is important on a number of levels. But one important level is that we were able to go out and contact Barbadians. We went on the radio, we went on TV, and persons came here, persons whom I have never even been aware of before, so that you're quite right. That is what we want to do. We are updating the database that we have. And we tend to prefer to use email because we use the BCC element, which means that we don't distribute persons' email details. Now, if you form a WhatsApp group, everybody has access to your details. But those persons who wish to do that are free to do that. You've got my details. Keep in touch with me, and I'll make sure that we can all keep in touch with each other. Now, if you're through, thank you very much. Very important points you've made. And the final one question, two questions. Could we take the two questions together, and then we'll give Madam Prime Minister the opportunity to give the responses and any final comments. And when we are finished, we are probably pretty close to 9:30, I think. And but don't run away. After the Prime Minister has made her comments and answered the last questions, we've got some refreshments. We'd like to allow the persons who are serving to serve the head table first, and after that, the audience will, there's a buffet on the other side of the door, and then we can get on with that. So don't go out through this door. We'll go through the back after that. Final questions.
Should I stand?
It's fine.
Good evening to everybody. And good evening, Attorney General, Prime Minister, Master of Ceremonies. I think I'm here for several reasons. I used to have a neighbor who's gone to the great beyond, your friend, who served here as an Attorney General for a number of years, Barbadian. I'm here because I think my relatives have begun to trace our roots. My name is David Jordan, and we've been able to trace the route up to the plantation. So you convening this meeting here, I thought it necessary to attend. And I'm happy that all of us here are attending this session today. I know you've made some attempts before. I think it is meaningful. And I'm here because I wanted to share one simple note. Number one, reference your 2020 vision. I'm sure you'll be able to, or plan, I'm sure you'll be able to learn from what Ghana is doing in terms of inviting persons back home. So you could learn from that experience. Secondly, because of my past experience in government service, I recognize through my travels and my current last 7 years we've been to Costa Rica and Central America, that there's a population out there looking like us. And we have not, I do not know if you're including them in your vision. As an example, where we've gone, and I just want to say that Gabi was in Costa Rica last year at our invitation, your mighty Gabi, our mighty Gabi. And he thoroughly was thrilled and overawed in terms of the reception. Costa Rica has a population of 5 million. A little more than 10% are people looking like us, mixed like us. And they like to be integrated into this movement. There's a natural affinity for them to respond to Jamaica for a number of reasons, both in terms of what they plant and what they smoke, you know what I mean? The music. We also have music that they want to hear similarly. Why my outreach to Central America is because we, and you probably would have known the name Mark Griffith, Dr. Mark Griffith, myself, and Ramiro Crawford have been painstakingly trying to knock the doors of CARICOM and all the member states to participate in our human noble effort. And I thought it necessary for us to be here, to be represented here, to make that point, that Barbados has an opportunity to reach out to Central America, specifically Costa Rica. Similarly, Panama has a population of a little more than 12–15%. people looking like us, and we are not embracing them in that initiative. That outreach should be tapping on, one, the level of resources that these people have, both in terms of economic, social, and otherwise. And as a matter of fact, Madam Prime Minister, 2 years ago, just before the demit of office of President Solis, was our personal friend we could reach out to. He extended an invitation to the region. Nobody responded. I'm not aware that anybody responded. I think that would be the best diplomatic way to say it, Mr. Walcott, right? I'm not aware of anybody responding. And just recently, the new president saw the wisdom in the outreach to the Caribbean. So I think marrying this in terms of your national initiative, and I'll also say to, I see a lot of faces here who probably wouldn't remember me from K-ville days, marrying this initiative with what you're doing, I just want to point out that whilst a lot of persons are happy with your infusion of enthusiasm, structured involvement in CARICOM and representation for the CSME, I just want to point out that one of the weaknesses that I recognize as a former person in the field in the public sector, and now in the private sector for the last 7 years, a number of the states, they speak at the table, and pay attention to what Sam said, because I never knew Sam had this extended area of expertise. We would have grounded, but we know him in the area of maritime affairs. Okay, Sam. I just want to point out that a number of the states have assigned, put the signatures to these statements, and have not moved. And I've noticed, Madam Prime Minister, through the chair, that the agenda on the CSME in terms of work to be done is outstanding. I do not know how you will tackle it. But I'll say very simply, in terms of my background, I recognize policy instruments are very important. And I had an experience in Montserrat, and I learned from that. Heritage, they've got policy instruments and plans and programs for every single area of activity to enable them to access funds from the EU. But it is only recently the Caribbean Development Bank tried to enforce on member states in an attempt to eliminate Montserrat from benefiting from poverty alleviation programs that other member states are supposed to have policy instruments. Madam Prime Minister, you have a charge that some of those states who speak so glibly, boldly, or in whatever way, take action. No action. We have a problem in terms of moving the single market. Sam.
Thank you.
Your statement emphasizes the need to operate as the OECS, and I do hope that Barbados will, in fact, be reaching out to the OECS so we could work together as one family. Having said that, I want to point out that my suggestion of embrace of Central America.
Can I equally relieve you of your burden? Because on Friday night, as Minister of Public Service, I approved the post for the opening of our embassy in Panama, which will be taking place in weeks.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
So that that is intended to be
I will also say very quickly
in Central America.
Can we then use this opportunity to wrap up? Yes. And one more person, and then, please.
Let me finally state.
No, can't get 5 minutes, sir.
I've seen ladies in
30
business
seconds.
traveling to Panama and Costa Rica to do business. So they have been ahead of the public sector into that
always
business.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm glad that you noticed that it was ladies and not men too.
Final question.
So, this lady here, just ask your question, and then you just put the two together.
Yeah.
Okay, Honorable Prime Minister, members of the head table, fellow Barbadians. My question is directed to the Attorney General. we have been listening to you about your problem that we all know about. Speaking to you now from a sports tourism platform. Yes. And what I find is that we in Barbados, we're not using sports as a resource tool to help alleviate the crime situation in Barbados. Just take a look at our stadium. We are looking at the scanners, yes, they're all fine. But what about the football grounds, the cricket grounds, the stadiums? Engage them. Yeah. Use sport as a resource. Also good for our tourism, because I'm also a tourism person. We had the Banks Hockey Festival. What has become of that? When the teams came in, our local people who played against them, when they're engaged in sports, they're all into nutrition, they're all into the gym, they're all into exercise, they're all into gear, They don't have time for guns. I think Jamaica did it. Jamaica has put a lot of funds, resources into sports, and look at what is happening. So I'm here pleading for my sportsmen and women in Barbados, not only for the ones that's active, but the ones that have the talent and they're involved in all sorts of activities, because as the Prime Minister said, the devil finds work for idle hands. Keep them engaged, build our stadiums, our fields, and I think you're going to go a long way in helping alleviate some of the crime.
And the Madam Prime Minister will respond.
One final question.
Yes, Digby Ambrose, citizen of the Caribbean. I know, from what I've heard this evening, you certainly seem to have got a strategic plan. And my question is, where travel is concerned in the region, what can you tell us about travel in the region with particular reference to Liat?
Thank you very much. You give Madam Prime Minister an opportunity to respond, because if we don't get Madam Prime Minister's response now, we might be thrown out of the room before we can do anything else.
Yes.
So,
certainly, I just want to raise that one.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't often get to say in the presence of the Prime Minister, me first. But on this occasion, she allows it. What you've just described is exactly the approach that we adopted when we were last in government. And it's an approach that remains relevant today. When we last had the opportunity to lead our country, we spent a significant amount of money putting lights at playing fields. Because we recognized that we needed, and we also put in a lot of pavilions and so on, because we recognized that when our boys and girls came home from school in the evening, that we needed to have some outlets for them. And it was an amazing experience. Now, unfortunately, most of those lights over the last decade have some of them not working. We even had portable lights because you couldn't put a permanent installation at every field. So exactly what you're described is something that we have begun to reactivate. We've put $2.5 million in the sports program for the year. We are paying very careful attention to the cultural side of things, because it's not just sports, it's also the arts. And in essence, we're saying that we have to orient our young people into positive activity, whether it is sport, whether it's learning to cook, whatever it is. And we're leaving no stone unturned. I'm happy to chat with you after, because I'm mindful of the time. But we keenly recognize that we have to go back to basics. The Prime Minister often recollects that there was a time in Barbados when every village had a youth club. Every village had a youth group. There was a time when we had Sing Out Barbados, when we had the Wilson Hill Club. I mean, people formed themselves. They didn't wait on any government to do it. They didn't wait on community development. Communities, perhaps because we didn't have any phones and so on then, I admit that things are different now, but communities got together and did all these things without any intervention at all, any assistance from government. We have some challenges, and we are prepared to take the lead, and therefore I hope that over the next few months we'll begin to see a significant impetus in the area of sports. And the one thing that the Prime Minister made sure and saved when all the cuts were being made was the Defence Force sports program. We cut just about everything else, but we were not prepared to allow our active young men to fall victim to the ills of our community simply because somebody could feel that the BDF couldn't afford it. We saved that program. And, you know, so that's the direction that we're going in. But I thank you for that intervention. Prime Minister?
Thank you. And we are in negotiations about the repair of the National Stadium. So it's a crying shame and a disgrace, quite frankly. And I feel even more because it's my constituency. With respect to Liat, sir, discussions have started. I've learned many a year ago that the worst thing you do is comment on things that are fluid. And therefore, suffice it to say that all of the countries in the region that I'm aware of, we have a fundamental commitment to the provision of affordable, reliable, regular transport. We fully appreciate that it can't be limited to one airline or to one mode of transport. We are working also to see how we can increase the maritime transport, and I give you the example of the Trinidad and Tobago Sea Bridge, the fast ferry between Tobago and Trinidad. When it was opened up just under 20 years ago, created new classes of travelers. One, nobody knew that there were so many school children, congregations, or sporting people and cultural people who wanted to travel between the two, but who could not afford to fly before. And secondly, what it did was to reduce the cost of living in Tobago, because people were able to go to Trinidad and access hardware and other key materials to be able to bring back into Tobago. We are satisfied that we have to work towards the building of a maritime bridge, a sea bridge, between these islands. In the 1950s, before I was born, I'm sure there's some in here who can tell us about the federal palm and the federal maple. We have to be able to bring in the 21st century the equivalent of those, which invariably means some form of fast ferry. We're trying to see how best we can make it happen through public-private partnership. We're doing so in a difficult world with countries that are, quite frankly, fighting up economically, but we are confident that we can make it happen in the next few years. Similarly, like buses, there are no ships that are sitting down waiting for us to buy, and a new bill takes 2 years as well too. So these things are part and parcel of deliberate planning and execution and getting the right mix for the public-private partnership. But it just gives us focus to work towards something. Jerome is reminding me that you know it better than most here because you all are further north than us and already benefiting from the ferries with Martinique and Dominica and Guadeloupe in a way that those of us that are a little further south don't have it as part of our practical reality. But we do believe that there are fast ferries across the world that can take up to 40-foot containers, 200 cars, 1,000 passengers. And if we can get that moving between the islands, it will make a significant difference. If we did nothing else going forward, that would change the economic realities and the opportunities for Caribbean people in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean, and ultimately in the Northern Caribbean, if an equivalent one goes up there. Okay, so thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister. Now, I need some assistance. I need a volunteer who having come here tonight and who will express their thanks and appreciation on behalf of all of us to the Prime Minister and the ministers and the delegation. Any volunteers?
Madam Prime Minister and the Honorable Dale Marshall, Honorable Jerome Walcott, Ambassador Commichon, on behalf of the Barbadian population resident in St. Lucia, I would like to extend our thanks to you for meeting here this evening and giving a very informative discussion to all of us here. And we would like to extend our heartfelt thanks for your presence, for your information, and for your encouragement for us to continue to work together as we gather in 2020.
Thank you so much.